Regarding Farage and reform, are we seeing a turning point, particularly among the youth?
I think we're seeing a turning point in this country more generally. I think we are on the cusp of a full-blown political realignment in Britain of the kind that America has just seen, but which has been building in this country for the last 15 years. So like my sort of bird's eye view of British politics is that, you know, with Farage and the UK Independence Party in the 2000s leading up to the Brexit referendum, you kind of had the beginning of this realignment. You then had the Brexit vote, which sort of brought it to the surface, made it unavoidable. Everybody realized that, oh, crikey, there are millions of people in this country that do not support the status quo, that do not support the elite consensus, that want a radically different vision of who we are. The Conservatives at that point had a unique opportunity to lean into that, like Donald Trump has done. They completely fumbled that. They diluted Brexit. They softened it up. They pushed the pedal down on mass immigration. They put it on steroids. They didn't really give a monkeys about the British people. They did what they want to do. That's what Tories always do. And they lost the realignment. Now, the story might have ended there. But actually, what happened in 2024 is the British people came back to the table and they said, we're not quite done with this realignment. We're going to give Nigel Farage 4 million votes. We're going to give him what he's not had before, 5 MPs in Parliament. We're going to give him a voice in the national political arena. And I think actually we're going to see how far we can push this thing and try and reshape the whole system. So as we're talking now in December 24, what have you got in the polling? You've got Reform on 25%. So they're up 10 points on the election in July. You've got Labour on 26%, you've got the Tories on 23%, you've got a two-party system becoming a multi-party system, and you've got millions of people out there saying, I don't want left or right anymore. I don't want Labour and the Tories. I don't want this society that I see around me. I don't want this managed decline. I don't want all of this immigration. I don't want soft on crime policies. I don't want two-tier policing. I don't want an economy that just works for London. I would quite like to live in a country that I respect, that keeps me safe, that I'm proud of, and that puts my interests first. That is why Farage is back at the forefront of British politics. That is why he is now the most influential politician, I would argue, of his generation. I think reform, if they get it right, you know, all political realignments are about demand and supply. You have to have the demand, but you have to have a party that can supply that with a credible, coherent, compelling message. I think if reform get that bit right, and they kind of lock into this demand, I think the next 5 years could deliver a political earthquake on a scale this country has never seen, really, since Labour replaced the Liberals. I mean, I think reform could go further than the SDP, the Social Democrats in the 1980s, which came close to replacing the Labour Party. I actually think Farage and reform could go much further because we are in this civilizational moment. And by that, I mean, you and I aren't even talking about policy, really. What we're talking about is a sense that we both have, and I think many viewers will have it too. We have a sense that our civilization here is on the table, that we actually want to save a country that we both knew and loved, but which, for different reasons, maybe we suspect, is now beginning to the survival of that country is beginning to be, you know, questioned and may not be guaranteed. And so for reform, the big message I think that many people are sending by voting for it is actually, no, we want our country back. We want to save our country. And I think that's where Farage is getting a lot of his headwind.
He has support from Elon Musk, doesn't he? Is it true? Is Musk putting money? Is he giving him money? I've heard this. He wants to give him millions of dollars.
So all I can say is what Nigel Farage has said publicly, which is he's got a very direct relationship with both Elon Musk and Donald Trump. And I think his new party treasurer, Nick Candy, also has relationships with Elon Musk. I think the reason I think that Elon Musk thing is significant is because there are lots of people in America who have gone through the Trump rebellion, who are looking at the West generally, and lots of people in Europe too, by the way, who are looking at Britain and asking themselves the same question, which is, what the hell happened to this country I used to respect? And it's that sense that Britain's completely lost its way. I was in Hungary recently giving a talk to some students, undergraduate university students, who were laughing at what is happening in Britain, laughing at the state of our country, laughing at how we don't have control over our borders, laughing at how we've just allowed this policy of mass immigration with no real opposition. And Americans say the same. Americans say, well, you're the country of Magna Carta. You're the country of individual liberty. You're the country, Winston Churchill and the finest hour. What the hell's happened to you? That's the question people are asking. And I think so far, the only person with a response that seems to be cutting through is not Kemi Badenoch, and it's certainly not Keir Starmer. I do think actually it's Nigel Farage, who is at least able to say, well, if we want to turn this thing around, here's what we need to do. End the policy of mass immigration, end the highest tax burden that we've had for 50, 60 years, end this era of big debt and big borrowing, which is crippling us financially, push back against woke ideology, which is a divisive, un-British belief system that's now in our schools, universities, and public institutions, and push back against net zero, which is making energy more expensive and smashing the working class. I think if you start with just some of those policies, you're already starting with a program that is fundamentally different from the elite consensus in this country.
Is that why Keir Starmer the other day did mention immigration, finally, very, very briefly, although then didn't seem to back that up at all?
Well, what Keir Starmer is trying to do is what Tony Blair tried to do 20 years earlier, which is kind of hold up his right flank in places like the Red Wall and Wales by saying, oh, I get it, we're gonna change things on immigration, or as Blair said, we're going to be tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. It's all nonsense. I mean, Keir Starmer is basically gaslighting the country, because what Labour have done is, firstly, on illegal migration, they've said they're going to smash the gangs. But I've talked to so many people in the border security world. Nobody thinks Labour's policy is going to work. They've removed any active deterrent that we had with the Rwanda policy, which wasn't perfect, but it could have worked if we tightened it up a little bit. They've liberalized the immigration system. They've made it easier for families to reunite. They've made it easier for people from Afghanistan to migrate into the country. They really don't have any fundamental desire to dramatically lower net migration into the country. And as we saw with both Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer after Southport, fundamentally, they do not view opposition to mass immigration as legitimate, as being something they want to entertain. And I think where they're going to come unstuck, and we're going to see this over the next 2 years, reform will demolish Labour in large parts of the Red Wall. There is no way Kemi Badenoch and the Tories will ever be competitive in the Red Wall again. I will come back on this show and eat my next book, which I've done once before when I slightly underestimated Jeremy Corbyn's vote share.
How much of it did you eat?
A few pages.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did.
Does anything happen to you, if you eat paper?
Not that I noticed. But the point here is, I think reform will basically run through the Red Wall and Wales, and they'll smash Labour in those areas. And then they will do really well down the coast of England into Kent and Essex and that traditional UKIP territory. And you'll have these two flanks opening up where reform will be able to, I think, win easily upwards of 100 seats, if not more. And, the current polling, God, it's only been 5 months since the general election. And already, on the current numbers today, you've got a hung parliament with the Conservatives still weaker than they were in July, but reform on 100 plus seats. So anything's possible.
When you say anything's possible, could Nigel Farage be Prime Minister?
I think so, yeah. I think the key point about British politics, which very few people out there have realised, I've been writing about this for the last few years, we have levels of volatility in our system. By that, I mean record numbers of people changing their vote. Labour voters going Lib Dem, Conservative going Reform, some Labour going Reform, non-voters going wherever. We have record levels of volatility. So the tribal allegiances that guided British politics over the last 50, 60 years are gone. My dad voted Labour, his dad voted Labour. That stuff's all going. So when you have a system that is that fluid and chaotic and unpredictable, and then you have these enormous issues like mass immigration, which the established parties are refusing to do anything about, and you've got borders that are not being controlled and people not feeling safe, then yeah, anything is possible. And as I say, if you can mobilize that public demand and supply it with something that is credible and compelling and coherent, and you can professionalize that party, which I actually think Reform are starting to do, more than 100,000 party members, big money now starting to come in. And, I've been around that world for 15 years. I've seen it from the inside. The organization that's going on now is in a completely different league from anything that happened with the Brexit Party or the UK Independence Party. When you start to see that and you see the reaction on the ground, you start to think, actually, there's a revolution that's starting in this country, I think. Wow. And it's going to really, the next 5 years are going to be so, so unpredictable. Anything could happen.